Something fascinating and maybe a little unsettling is happening in Washington, D.C. It's not just about the usual political theater on Capitol Hill, or the pronouncements from the White House. Look closer at the street level. You'll see uniforms, D.C. Metropolitan Police, the Secret Service, distinct camouflage patterns, state flag patches on National Guard shoulders. And here's the crucial part. These troops were not primarily summoned by the federal government. They were sent by governors from Florida, Texas, Tennessee. This isn't just a logistical footnote. It is a quiet, profound declaration of state power projected into the heart of federal authority. A visual representation of a power shift brewing for years, now playing out on the streets of the Capitol. The purpose here is to unpack what this all means. This isn't just about troop movements or securing federal buildings. It's about the structure of American federalism and the evolving relationship between states and the central government. Deployments escalated in spring and summer of 2025, after large, disruptive protests overwhelmed local police. Mayor Muriel Bowser and the Department of Defense requested broad assistance. The response wasn't a unified federal action. Instead, state houses made individual decisions. Florida sent 500 Guard members. Texas authorized 1,000 troops. Tennessee, South Dakota, Arizona joined in. Each sent units to bolster security around federal landmarks. To understand just how unusual this situation is, you first have to understand how the National Guard is supposed to work. The Guard occupies a unique space in the American system, a dual-hatted force. Most of the time, these are citizen soldiers under the command of their state's governor. They respond to state-level emergencies, hurricanes in Florida, wildfires in California, floods along the Mississippi. The governor is their commander-in-chief. They are deployed under what is known as state active duty, Title 32 status, state control, federal pay. The second hat the Guard wears is a federal one. The president can federalize Guard units, placing them under Department of Defense command. This is Title 10 status. What makes recent deployments to Washington, D.C. different is the blurring of that line. Troops sent by Florida, Texas, and other states were not federalized under Title 10. They arrived in the Capitol under their governor's authority, creating a gray area. They supported a federal function, the security of the national capital, yet remained under home state command. The legal and constitutional framework governing the deployment of the National Guard is a tapestry woven from various articles of the Constitution, federal statutes, and court precedents. At its core is Article 1, Section 8, which grants Congress the power to provide for calling forth the militia to execute the laws of the Union, suppress insurrections, repel invasions. But the current situation in D.C. largely sidesteps that direct federalization. Instead, it relies on the Emergency Management Assistance Compact, or EMAC. Ratified by all 50 states, D.C., and the U.S. territories, EMAC creates a legal framework for states to share resources during governors' declared states of emergency. However, its application for sending armed state military forces to operate in the federal district is a legal frontier. Critics argue that this stretches the original intent of EMAC. When a Florida National Guard unit is operating in Washington, D.C., who is truly in charge? The on-the-ground commander from the D.C. Guard or federal law enforcement can give tactical direction, but the ultimate authority rests with the governor of Florida. This creates a fragmented command structure. What happens if different state contingents have different rules of engagement set by their governors? This tension between state and federal control over the National Guard is not new. One of the most famous examples is the Little Rock Crisis of 1957. Arkansas Governor Orville Faubus deployed the Arkansas National Guard to actively block integration. He defied a federal court order. In response, President Eisenhower federalized the entire Arkansas National Guard and sent in the 101st Airborne Division. The 1960s and 70s were rife with similar confrontations. During the 1968 riots in Chicago, Washington, D.C., and Baltimore following the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr., President Johnson federalized Guard units. The command was messy, and coordination between federal troops, federalized Guard, and local police was often chaotic. This confusion had lethal consequences. The most infamous example is the Kent State shooting in 1970. The Ohio National Guard, under the command of the governor, opened fire on student protesters, killing 4 and wounding 9. So how does today's situation compare? There are key similarities: deployment of the Guard for domestic law enforcement and multiple layers of authority. However, the primary difference is the impetus. Today's scenario is more nuanced. States are not acting in defiance, but rather stepping into a perceived leadership vacuum. The question we must ask is, why is this happening now? A significant part of the answer lies in growing federal gridlock. Razor-thin congressional majorities, intense partisan animosity, endless political brinkmanship. When Washington seems incapable of solving its own problems or securing its own perimeter, a power vacuum is created. Governors are often seen as pragmatic executives compared to their federal counterparts and are stepping in to fill that void, not just Guard deployments. States have formed their own climate coalitions, immigration, healthcare, economic policy. The Guard deployment is the most militarized, visually striking example. Sending troops to D.C. is a powerful political move for a governor. It signals leadership and action to voters, demonstrates strength and commitment to law and order. Washington, D.C. is not a state. It lacks full autonomy and resources, including a large National Guard. Its security is a patchwork of local agencies and federal agencies. This new model of state-led security assistance presents a classic double-edged sword. On one side, it offers the potential for more targeted, flexible, and perhaps even more democratically accountable responses. When the federal government acts, it often does so with a blunt instrument, deploying massive resources under a monolithic command structure. A state-led approach, in theory, could be more nuanced. A governor, being closer to the people and the citizen soldiers who make up their Guard, might be more cautious about deploying them. However, the other side of that sword is sharp and dangerous. The most significant risk is fragmentation. Imagine a tense standoff where Guard units from 3 different states are standing shoulder to shoulder. But each has received slightly different instructions from their governor about when and how to engage. This is a recipe for disaster. Ultimately, this fragmentation could lead to a 2-tiered system. The response to a crisis could depend entirely on the political alignment of the governors. A future D.C. mayor might find that only governors from their own political party are willing to send troops. So we come back to where we started, on the streets of Washington, D.C., watching the patchwork of state uniforms. This is more than just a temporary security measure. It's a symptom of a much larger realignment occurring within the American body politic. The deployment of state-controlled National Guard units to the federal capital represents a significant move by states into a domain once nearly exclusive to the federal government. This trend is driven by the potent combination of federal gridlock and assertive state leadership. When the central government is perceived as slow, ineffective, or politically divided, governors are discovering both the political incentive and operational capacity to act independently. This is not a settled debate. It is the question of our time. Recent National Guard deployments are not the final chapter, but the prologue. They force us to confront a fundamental question about our republic. Should states have a greater say in national security? Should the governor of Texas or Florida have a direct hand in securing the U.S. Capitol? There is no easy answer, but it is a conversation we must have. Because what is at stake is not just the security of a city, but the very structure of power in the United States, and how we choose to govern in the turbulent decades to come.